Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I'd like to read this article from NBC News in New York, give you some of my thoughts, and you let me know if I'm being reasonable or unreasonable. I imagine this comment section of this video is probably going to be the worst comment section in any video on my channel, so I would just politely ask that you just try to understand where the other person is coming from and be a little nice. I realize there's no chance of that happening. So does Mr. Clinton. But he's here, and he's watching you, and he's standing guard, and he has very sharp claws, so you should listen to him. It says here, most riot looting cases from last year dropped by New York City district attorneys. 1 year ago, parts of New York City felt out of control as crowds of looters were seen smashing storefront after storefront. The mayhem continued night after night from late May into June. At one point, there was even a so-called looting dance party on the streets of Soho. The mob seemingly pillaged at will. Many were caught on tape, some with their faces visible. Others even posted on their social media their own videos of their action those nights. "We got the Rolex store," some in the crowd can be heard screaming in one video. Police were far outnumbered and seemingly unprepared. Hundreds of arrests were made during the looting and riots. Many of those arrests took place in Manhattan and along some commercial streets in the Bronx where the problems were widespread. Surveillance videos show looters breaking into many locally owned Bronx stores that were left ransacked. NYPD data reviewed by the NBC New York I-Team shows 118 arrests were made in the Bronx during the worst of the looting in early June. Since then, the New York NYPD says the Bronx DA and the courts have dismissed most of those cases, 73 in all. 18 cases remain open, and there have been 19 convictions for mostly lesser counts like trespassing, counts which carry no jail time. Jessica Betancourt owns an eyeglass shop that was looted and destroyed along Burnside Avenue in the Bronx last June. "Those numbers, to be honest with you, is disgusting," Betancourt said when told of the few cases being prosecuted. Betancourt is also vice president of a local merchants association. She says local business leaders are upset few are being held accountable for the destruction they caused. "I was in total shock that everything is being brushed off to the side." In Manhattan, many major retailers and local shops were broken into in late May and into June. Amid the pandemic, mobs and organized criminals were taking advantage of huge protests rocking the city after the Minneapolis police killing of George Floyd. In Manhattan, the New York NYPD data shows that there were 485 arrests. Of those cases, 222 were later dropped and 73 seeing convictions for lesser counts like trespassing, which carries no jail time. Another 40 cases involved juveniles and were sent to family court. 128 cases remain open. Law enforcement expert and former NYPD chief of patrol Wilbur Chapman voiced anger at the DA's dropping of so many looting and burglary cases. "If they are so overworked that they can't handle the mission they're hired for, then maybe they should find another line of work," Chapman said. Sources in the DA's office tell NBC New York that evidence in some cases was simply not strong enough for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And with the courts closed amid the pandemic, there was a huge backlog of cases. It was unwieldy for both the courts and the prosecutors. The NYPD did set up a task force after the riots to examine videos and photos to separate out suspected rioters from peaceful protesters. That work shares similarities with what the FBI is doing in making hundreds of arrests after the riot at the U.S. Capitol. But unlike federal prosecutors, who are moving forward with prosecutions of Capitol Hill rioters, New York City prosecutors are disposing of most burglary-related cases. The NYPD says there was tedious follow-up investigations led in part by Deputy Inspector Andrew Arias, where evidence included photos and recovered stolen property. "We had to analyze each case individually and see if, in fact, we could prove the right person had committed the crime," Arias said. Former Chief Chapman says while the NYPD did some follow-up, he said the data shows district attorneys and the courts have not. "It allowed people who committed crimes to go scot-free," Chapman said. Bronx DA Darcel Clark declined repeated requests for an interview, as did Manhattan DA Cyrus Vance, whose office has been busy with a team of prosecutors investigating separate allegations of tax fraud surrounding President Trump's businesses, allegations Trump denies. In an internal memo, Vance says there were over 600 commercial burglary arrests, in addition to over 3,500 unindicted felony cases in the pipeline waiting to move forward in the courts. His memo says all those cases were on hold because of the pandemic. Before dropping a case, Vance told his prosecutors to review defendants' criminal histories, whether police could really place the suspect at the scene, and whether the individual caused any damage to the store. Vance told his office, "For many of these commercial burglaries, you'll be asked to reduce the initial felony charge to a misdemeanor and to dispose of the case with an eye towards rehabilitation." He also stressed the continued goal to achieve consistency and equitable treatment in these cases. A court spokesman says decisions to dismiss cases were primarily made by the district attorneys. An application must be made by the district attorney, or as they have done with hundreds of DATs, decline to prosecute them, said Lucien Chalfin. In the Bronx, some businesses that had insurance are back, but the scars from the riots a year ago remain. They could do it again because they know they won't get the right punishment, Betancourt said. That was the woman from the eyeglass store. So, I mean, obviously, in reading this news article, I am very, very highly biased because of my personal position. I own a store. I rent a store in this area that they're talking about. And in spite of the many, many YouTube comments and stupid-ass, net worth websites that claim I'm a millionaire, I'm not. If something were to happen to my business, I'm not just starting a new one. And, even if I did have an insane amount of insurance that would cover this, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter because, as I've explained in this video and many others, and as many people to my left politically tend to agree with, at least when it comes to health insurance and healthcare, insurance is a giant scam, and they will always find a way to weasel out of virtually anything. So let's say you have a business and you actually have full insurance coverage. You're still going to have to probably sue your insurance company to get them to pay out. And if they do pay out, it may take 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, during which time your customers will all go to another business. And those other businesses will most likely hire your employees who don't feel like waiting 6 months to get their job back. They're going to move on with their life. Your customers are also going to move on with their lives, and you're probably going to be screwed. That's even if they pay out, which they never pay out because their insurance, and again, I just listen to this and many other business owners that have ever dealt with insurance. I did actually walk through some of these protests last year, and some of them I actually included on my YouTube channel. Many of these protests were actually nice. They were people that were holding signs, that were aggravated at something, that were chanting why they were aggravated. And, they walked, they made their voice heard. They spoke to local representatives and officials. They spoke to people from the police, and then they went home. And then there were people that seemingly wanted to take advantage of the situation and the fact that people were aggravated and angry to start destroying shit. And I make a distinction between these two groups of people. Protesters, people who are destroying shit and taking advantage of a situation. These are two separate and distinct groups of people. But there were large groups of people that were destroying things. And what was weird for me as a business owner during this period of time was when I would say, wow, this is a bad situation. What this cop did was wrong. I don't think he should be a cop. I think he deserves jail time. And then at the same time say, why is the Korean barbecue across the street from me completely destroyed? What did they do? Sometimes people would come up to me and say, why are you more mad about the Korean barbecue than you are about the horrible thing that happened? And what I would usually say is, I have the ability to multitask. Sometimes I'll be doing a board repair while taking a customer service phone call. Sometimes I will be on vacation while simultaneously, scouting out new store locations. I have the ability to do two things at the same time. I can simultaneously say that someone who hijacks a protest to start randomly destroying shit and post it on social media is a bad person, while simultaneously understanding that the reason that the initial people are protesting might actually have some validity to it. I can separate these two things. And it's really strange to me when people pretend that I'm not able to multitask. I can, and I can dislike two groups of people at the same time. I speak to my personal trainer and good friend about this at the gym every night. He's African American. I'm Italian, Hungarian, El Salvadorian, German, a bunch of other crap, kind of a mutt. And, we would have disagreements from time to time. Sometimes we would see 100% eye to eye on a particular issue. Sometimes in some of these cases we wouldn't. I would learn something from his perspective. Sometimes maybe he would learn something from my perspective. But we would always kind of go back and forth on these things. And I can understand where people are coming from. At the same time, when I see that there are slaps on the wrist for a lot of what happened last year, like I can't pretend that this is not something that affects my decision-making process in any way, shape, or form when it comes to wanting to leave. I mean, I'm just going to be honest there. I don't have the ability to stay in business if what happened to that Korean grocer or barbecue happened to me. I don't have that money in reserve. I don't have the same insurance plan that Target or Best Buy do. I don't have the same insurance company. I don't have the same attorneys to fight the insurance company on staff that they do. If something happens to me, I would be gone. So what I did during this whole thing was I put up I had this, JP sent me this 400-watt truck air horn and a giant battery. So I hooked that up to a relay. I hooked the relay up to a power supply that's controllable via USB, and I hooked that up to a computer with remote desktop. And every time there would be noise or someone banging on my door above a certain volume, what I would do is I would trigger it from my phone to play this air horn. I also connected it to a giant light, and for some period of time, a short period, I was actually live streaming this. And that's just one of those things that I don't want to do. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to deal with that at all. And I would be lying if I said, you're probably not supposed to say this kind of shit, but I would be lying if I said that it wasn't part of my thought process when I'm looking at places that I would like to open a store. How is this handled? What happened? Right across the river, you have a neighborhood that one of my managers lives in, and they had a lot of protests last year, a lot of them. You have people walking up and down the streets, you have people carrying stuff, and they would go to the stores, and sometimes the stores would give them bottles of water, and sometimes the people that work at the store would join the protest. They'd talk back and forth, they'd work, I disagree with you here, I agree with you here, blah, blah, blah. There was actually a dialogue. It was the type of movement towards positive change that actually works. That's great. I'd love to open a store in that neighborhood. Except for the fact that it's, fucking Jersey with 2.3% property tax. But you get the point, that type of neighborhood. And then you have areas where it's just destroyed. And after all of it happens, you have this. Now, on one hand, I understand where they're coming from, which is that it's difficult to prove in some cases what's going on here. Many businesses have, I used to be in the security camera installation business for a very short period of time because I realized the budget that most people have for security camera installs. They want their security camera to be installed for about $5, parts being $1. Many businesses in New York City have security cameras that are like 3 by 2 pixels where you're not going to make out anything. So it's probably very difficult to prove in some cases who broke in. And also you have just so many people who were out last year. Going through all of that is going to be insane. I also understand that the court system is incredibly backed up right now. You have a lot of cases that were supposed to be, again, you have cases from January and February of 2020 that are just now going to start, being gotten to. I had an architectural firm screw me over. It was called Park Bench Architects and Blueberry Builders, and I went to commercial claims court because they said in an email that they were going to refund me for the genuinely horrible work that they did. They said they were going to refund me. They said they were sending a check. They never did. So I went to commercial claims court, and they said, okay, due to COVID, things are a little backed up. You should hear back from us in a month. That was 16 months ago. Like 16 months ago, and I have heard nothing. So the court system is horribly backed up right now. So I can understand why there is an incentive structure to just kind of toss a lot of the small of these cases out to make them go away, because you have a lot of footage to sift through, a lot of probably 144p footage, if even, and you have the court system horribly backed up. But at the same time, I understand why people like the eyeglass store are looking at this and going, this is horrible. If you had your store broken into and destroyed, and you see that the people that did it are not even going to go to jail, they get to go onto your property, break into it, destroy things, make it so it's impossible to run your business for a short period of time after it's been ransacked, and there's no consequences, that's going to leave a fairly bitter taste in your mouth towards the people who did it, but more importantly, the people who allowed it to happen without a consequence to the people who did it. It's one of those weird things because I'm not saying this is right. To be 100% clear, I'm not saying this is okay, because I know some jackass in the comments will say, Lewis, that this is okay. I could understand if someone who is mad at the police for a particular reason, or mad at a politician for a particular reason, looted or broke into the police station or the political office, or the office that the politicians are working out of. My brain could make the connection there. Even if it's wrong, my brain could kind of make a connection. But it's difficult for me to make a connection between an issue for an eyeglass store, and then there's an issue with the eyeglass. There's an issue with the police. There's an issue with politicians or our political system, and then the eyeglass store just gets destroyed. That's not something that's not an inference I can draw. That's not a justification that my brain is able to make. I'm not able to have the same sympathy for the individuals who committed that crime as I think these district attorneys are having with them. And I would be very, very mad, very, very angry. And I mean, like, again, I've seen, I see walk-in business do this over everything that's happened over the past year and a half. I see rent and expenses doing this. I know that the city is going to have to add, it's going to have to do a lot to make up for a lot of budget deficits. And I can see that starting already with my DCA video that I will include down below. And I'm taking road trips. I'm checking out Florida. I'm checking out Tennessee. I'm checking out Virginia. I'm checking out Wisconsin. And if my place actually were broken into, rather than just every place around me broken into, I probably would have already been there. Again, they say that in some businesses they had insurance or back, but again, you have to remember with insurance, as anybody who is for universal health care, because they understand that our insurance system is a scam, understands, it doesn't always work. You could easily have $500,000 in damage and only get $200,000 paid out after 6 months. And when you tell your employees, I can't pay you for 6 months, they've probably moved on. They've probably went somewhere else. Your customers have probably went somewhere else. Your business is never going to be the same after that. So it somewhat bothered me when people said that stuff is covered by insurance. They should have had insurance, because it's often the people who said insurance will cover it that will often be the people who admit that insurance is a giant scam in many ways. Reading this does make me sad. I figured this was going to be the case in the political climate that we're in, how the court system works in our city or doesn't work in the city. I figured that there were not going to be consequences for a lot of the individuals who did these things, and that is sad. And the reason that I find it sad more than most anything else is that the people who committed these crimes are then going to get tossed in with the people that were actually peacefully protesting. I notice that there's a complete lack of nuance when it comes to any of these issues from both sides of the aisle nowadays. And I understand why. These are emotionally charged issues. People are at the end of their rope. They're sick and tired and blah, blah, blah. And they also watch a lot of the news, which a lot of, CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all this stuff. It's kind of like watching professional wrestling. It's like watching the WWF as a kid. I'll be honest. It's like the adult version of it in many ways. I understand that, but there's very little nuance. And when there's no real, genuine, tangible consequences for the people that crossed that line from peacefully protesting into destroying the eyeglass shop, destroying the Korean grocer, destroying the Korean barbecue place, which really had nothing to do with any of what happened, it makes it easier for people to then conflate it all together, which is bad. Oversimplifications of any of these issues are not the way things should go. And it's just not, this just kind of makes me sad all around. And yeah, that's definitely something that I look at. And for me, it's not even particularly a race issue. It's more a cultural and ideological issue of an area. I went to one, because a lot of the people that were destroying stuff and smashing things and standing on tables and breaking windows and all that were much pastier than me. They were much whiter than I was. I would see this. I was riding my bike around as a lot of this was happening and just taking a look. Steve was videotaping some of it because he just thought this is a once-in-a-lifetime crazy event. You had a lot of white people doing this. You have just a lot of spoiled children that just wanted to fuck shit up. And that's what they did. And, for me, it's not really a racial thing so much as a cultural and ideological thing. When I look at places that I'd like to open a business, I would want to open a business where that didn't happen. Or if it did happen, there were consequences for the individuals involved, because I'm not a millionaire. I'm not someone who trusts that insurance is going to reimburse me and make me whole again when something like this happens that I have no control over. That when someone does something that's horrible, where I can agree with the people protesting, is bad, dude shouldn't be a cop, dude should be in jail, I'm with you, I would march with you, I would hold a sign with you. Well, when that happens, that I have zero control over, that there's a risk that my place gets destroyed, yeah, absolutely, that is most certainly something that is in my head. It's most certainly something that is guiding my decisions. It's not really even a race thing. I remember, I've been going all over the country over the past few weeks. We stopped at a motel in Lumberton, North Carolina, and this clerk asked me, what do you do? And I said, we're number one in MacBook repair. And she looks at me and goes, we're number one in crime. No, really, Google it. And I'm like, no, she must be kidding. And then I Google it. It's like, wow, you really are number one in crime in North Carolina. Steve almost had his cell phone taken by someone, but he figured out what was going on. White dude. I'm in the parking parking lot, and there's 3, again, pastier people than me that are just kind of staring at me, and then they start following me, and they start like slowly encroaching on me, and it's like, you're the worst criminals ever. I walked up to one, I said, like, you're done here. Like, I see what you're doing. Nice try. Not going, I probably wouldn't want to open a store there either. It's not so much for me about red versus blue or black versus white, but rather the more granular elements of the culture and the ideology of an area and the people in it and how they deal with these types of situations. And you have areas that were very good at dealing with these type of situations, whether it's the area right across the pond where people were actually speaking back and forth to one another during a protest, or that gentleman, that cop in Michigan that was actually speaking directly to protesters and saying, we want to turn this into a parade. Let me hear what your issues are. Let's work together, versus what we had here in New York City. For me, it really has to do with the ideology, the culture of an area, to the extent of what is acceptable. What do you do when these issues occur? How do you deal with them? Because again, there were areas where there was one guy, I forget his name. Gentleman was in Michigan. He's a really amazing police captain or police chief. He actually stopped. He put down his baton and everything. He spoke to the protesters. There was a back and forth. He said, man, we want to turn this into a parade. I forget his name. Hopefully somebody in the comments remembers it. And they had a back and forth discussion. They went through their issues together. They shook hands. Nothing happened in that area. Nothing bad happened. They had a good back and forth relationship, and everything seemingly went well in that area. That's a talented policeman right there, and he integrates with his community very well. That's the type of area where I'd be open to opening a business, or an area where I remember there's one area right across. Again, if it wasn't for New Jersey, insane asinine property taxes, there were a lot of protests, and with the way it went, the business owner said, "Oh, here, I have a bottle of water for you. You're probably very parched from marching back and forth in June summer weather," and they worked out their stuff. I saw people working out their stuff in the middle of the street, talking things out, and things didn't get destroyed. It's very difficult to, when you have some sort of movement, or when you want social change, to draw a line and say, here is the box of what is acceptable in my movement. Here is what is not a part of my movement. That's not there. So finish just like something basic like right to repair. I did this video about 7 years ago on how reflowing flip chip BGAs as a repair and calling it a repair is bullshit. It's not a repair. It's not going to work. If there's corrosion under it from liquid damage, that's one thing. If you're just reflowing a flip chip BGA or a graphics chip and you're offering a 30-day warranty on your $200 repair, in my opinion, you are fucking over that customer. You are screwing them over. And what I've noticed with right to repair is, in order to get real buy-in from people, they need to believe that what we're doing is a good thing, and they need to see us as good people. And if we offer repairs that die after 45 days with a 30-day warranty, it doesn't matter that we should have the right to repair. They're not going to support us. So I put a very clear line in the sand, and I said that people who do these types of repairs, or people that do component level board repairs where main battery power lines are fixed with 46 gauge wires, those are crap. Those are garbage. And there's probably lots of shops that looked at that video that said, I don't want to be associated with anything with Lewis. I'm not going to support Lewis. I'm not going to support anything that he associates himself with. And I'm okay with that, because I want to cut out the more toxic elements of this as a movement. And I understand here that there are likely people that agree with a lot of what was being said in the protest, maybe not all of it, but a good amount of it, that would then see that they would not condemn specific instances like this, that would then cause them to say, no, I don't like you at all on anything. Because, and it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, again, if I were the owner of that eyeglass store, I may agree with the nice protesters on it, but if this is allowed to happen and there are no consequences for the people that did this, it then makes it easier. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's rational. I'm not saying it should be this way. I'm just saying what I see. For them to then just blend it all together as one big thing and say, well, screw all of that. And that would be a real shame. But like, I don't, that's what leads to, immature culture wars and the Fox versus CNN versus MSNBC wrestling bullshit that we see nowadays. I'm not a fan of that, which is why I think this is going to backfire. I think the DA taking a very light approach to this is likely going to backfire in a bad way. But in areas where you have rampant destruction for a short period of time, combined with no consequences, there will be a consequence to that. I don't think the consequence is going to be something that happens. It's not going to be a lack of consequence to people. I think it's going to be a consequence in terms of businesses are going to say, you know what, $200 a square foot to be there, not really. I'm not feeling it anymore. Because you have to understand that a lot of these areas where this happened, they are very expensive. They are $70, $100, $200, $300 per square foot. In my real estate series, I showed you areas right in this area where there was places that were about the size of my current store that were going for $40,000 to $50,000 a month. One of them was asking $75,000 a month. That's a lot of money to pay in an area where you have the risk of that type of thing happening. So absolutely, when I am thinking about places that I would like to open a store or locate my business, I'm definitely in the back of my head is, how are things like this handled? And New York City, it's just nope. Like, I'm here because I opened here a long time ago, because I have a customer base here, because I have an employee base here. And this is an industry where getting people up to speed is not really very easy. People have said, why don't you just do on-the-job training? That works for maybe 1 out of 1,000 people. I've been through people that had electronics engineering degrees that were horrible board repair people, and it took months to figure it out while they were getting, $20 to $40 an hour. I've had people that, it's really difficult to find it. So that's why I'm here. But yeah, I wouldn't, I don't know. I'm just kind of repeating myself at this point. I'm kind of curious what you all think of this article, of the situation. That's it for today. And as always, hope you learned something. See you on a later video.